Kent?
Morning, everybody. Kent McCarty. I represent District 101, which is the north part of Lamar County. So Oak Grove, Summerall, Olo, that area. Committees I'm on, real quick, I'm the Vice Chair of Education. I'm on accountability, efficiency, and transparency, banking and financial services, conservation and water resources, universities and colleges, and municipalities. This year, we've had a much slower year than last year, which is probably a good thing. It's felt pretty hectic, but didn't have a pandemic rise up in the middle of our session to kind of delay everything. So that's been nice. But some of the big stuff we've done this year in education in particular, obviously we just passed the teacher pay raise, which we're all really excited about. We've done some legislation in pre-K. We're still working out some of the details on that. We've done some incentives for teachers, some new teacher loan forgiveness that we're still working on the details on, but I think we'll be able to get that passed. And then another thing we've done this year in education that I think is really going to do a lot to address our teacher shortage is allow for reciprocity for teachers with an out-of-state license. So before the teacher would get a shorter term license, a provisional license, in other words, now they can get a full 5-year license. And I think that bill actually, we may have to work out a few more things on that, but it's close to the end. So we have a lot of things right here at the end that are about to come together. But again, it's been a good year up here, much less chaotic than last year. And hopefully we can finish it out that way.
Thank you. And now to our rookie, welcome Representative Tubb, and look forward to hearing you introduce yourself. I'll let you go ahead and unmute yourself, and then you'll be ready.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you to the ADP for letting me be on this morning. Yes, I am the most freshman member of the House of Representatives. It's been an exciting few months getting to there and trying to make friends and get to know people that can help me navigate, because it's definitely been a great experience and a lot to learn in a short period. So, but yes, my name is Joseph Tubb. I represent District 87, which covers a lot of the northeast part of Lamar County and the most southwest part of Forest County. The committees I was assigned to are accountability, agriculture, constitution, conservation, and workforce development. So I'm looking forward to helping in those areas and using the workforce development and the agriculture definitely are two that I really am proud to be on because I have some experience in it. So I look forward to serving. Yes, we have a busy week. There's a lot of things in conference. There's a lot of things that are coming up that we've got to do before the session ends, and I look forward to getting that done this week.
Thank you. Jansen?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us. Hold on just a second. I got some. There we go. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having us. I represent South Lamar County, and a majority of my district is in Pearl River County. I was appointed to the Agriculture, Transportation, Elections, Judiciary B, and the Youth and Family Affairs committees last year when I took office. Like Representative Tubb said, we have a busy week this week. I'm conferring on a couple of the Judiciary B bills that are coming through the House and the Senate. As you know, we've focused on trying to do criminal justice reform last session and then this session. So that's one of my project areas, and we'll be busy this week, maybe even into next week, trying to get some of these bills passed, to bring some common sense criminal justice reform to the state. So that's me, and if you have any questions, I'm here.
Well, thank you all for those introductory remarks and giving all of our participants some context about what you're doing and the areas you represent. The first issue I want to just throw out is, we'll probably move fairly quickly, but I think it's safe to say that we all understand the important role that the vaccine and the vaccine rollout is playing in the economic recovery. And I think that the men and women of the state health department and the local county health departments and the National Guard and others who have helped implement this have done a great job. And obviously now there are other places to receive vaccine. including the universities have now been allocated vaccine. But specifically, and we can just kind of pass this around, or if anybody has any comment, is there anything that the business community can do to help this roll out or help work through this on this important issue of the vaccine? So I'll just sort of toss that out real quickly.
Since nobody else is jumping in, I think the best thing the business community can do, from my perspective, is just to encourage their employees to become vaccinated. I don't think that we want to make any vaccination mandatory for individuals without that, other than school-age children. But I think just encouraging employees to get vaccinated, trying to show them the facts of vaccine safety. Vaccines are not like they used to be. There's so much technology that's gone into developing vaccines. I think these vaccines are safe. I've personally been vaccinated and encourage everybody else to. I think that's what businesses can do to help more people become vaccinated.
Thank you. Any other comments on that topic? If not, we'll move on to the second topic, which is fairly complicated, or fairly has a lot of pieces to it. So obviously, competitiveness, economic development, workforce development, and income taxes are all vital and pivotal cogs to the state's economy and to moving the state forward. So increasing competitiveness of the state was one of the drivers behind changing the flag. And that seems to be a continuing theme for much of the policy being considered in Jackson. There's a focus on streamlining our economic development incentives, overhauling workforce development system, and recently a bill passed the House to eliminate the state income tax. So let's kind of break some of these issues down and talk about them. First, on the incentive side, in February, the Senate passed legislation created the Mississippi Flexible Tax Incentive Program, and then the House passed an amended version last week. It consolidates several of these things. But I think this is one of the piece of legislation that's been referred to. I know I've heard the Lieutenant Governor call it performance-based and not promise-based, and you all have seen, been a part of, or heard of economic development incentives that worked and those that maybe that did not work as well. So let's talk a little bit about on the incentive side, and then we'll get into the phasing out of the income tax as sort of the second piece of this. So I don't know who wants to draw the lucky straw. I'll be glad to start calling out folks. Let's start with one of our house colleagues, since the tax conversation seems to be the hottest over there. So Ken or Jansen, I'll let one of y'all chime in here if you want to.
Yeah, hey, we're talking about the tax cut. That sounds fun. So yeah, so the drive behind that is, like you said, competitiveness. There are 9 states, I believe, in the United States who have eliminated their income tax, and studies show that 7 of those 9 states, have seen a growth in GDP and a growth in that competitiveness that you were talking about. The two that you don't see that with are I think it was Wyoming and Alaska. And the reason behind that is because their source of revenue is strictly based on the oil and gas, their oil and gas and resource taxes. But the goal for our plan was simply to make Mississippi the most, attractive state in the Southeast for someone to come in and open a business, move their family, start their career, and grow their own income. And I think the mindset behind it was it's attractive because it's a voluntary tax. It's not forced out of your paycheck every week or every 2 weeks. It's a tax that you choose to pay to go buy your goods. Secondly, it is a tax that is more broad. The base is broader. It's not focused on taxing just income, which as conservatives, many of us believe that, a tax on income is a penalty. It penalizes productivity and it penalizes work. But basically, those are the thoughts behind the plan. It's a way to broaden our base, or reduce the tax burden on our workers, and make us an attractive state to bring in enterprise and new people. And that's the gist summary.
Okay. Anybody else on the House side? So in effect, it's I'm gonna use the word exchange. Correct me if that's not exchange for the income tax. There's a broader set of I'm gonna call them use taxes. If you buy, you pay. Is that a fair characterization?
Right. That's the consumption tax. That's what I said earlier. That's, when you have the different taxes and you're looking at, I guess the best type of tax you want your base to be broad. You don't want a certain group of people carrying the whole burden. And while it increases and broadens the base, the fact that it broadens the base, it actually is reducing the overall tax burden, or at least that's the concept, behind the idea, is that we're moving it around, we're spreading it out to where everyone pays their fair share. People who are driving through the state and using our roads and services pay their share if they stop at the gas station. People who, I think somebody used the example, the drug dealer down the street is not paying income taxes because, you can't tax income on cocaine. So he's paying his income tax. He's paying his tax when he's going to buy his wrappers and his drug goodies. That's the argument, that it shares, it broadens the base and is a more fair and level type of tax.
Okay. Representative Tubb, Representative McCarty, any more words on the House side? And I'll turn to Senator Johnson, but I'll give y'all an opportunity to speak.
I'd just like to comment. I agree with Representative Owen. I like the broader base of the sales tax. It's going to reach more people to help shore up the revenue of our state. I look forward to phasing out the state income tax. I think it will be a driver to help people when they won't look at Mississippi as a state to move to. And something that he did mention was the reducing the grocery tax to 4.5% was a thing that will help the elderly. I think it'll help everybody that buys, because we all buy groceries. So I think I think it's a good thing. I think that I don't know if it's going to get worked out this session. Hopefully it will. But if it doesn't, it'll be something that we can spend this year really looking at and dissecting and vetting it through everybody that'll be affected, and come up with a great piece of legislation for next year.
Thank you.
And just real quick, going back to the income tax real fast. So the plan we initially released, was just the starting conversation, in my opinion. There's a lot of work to be done on the bill. I think, we're a Republican-led state. This is something many people ran on. I ran on eliminating the income tax. It was one of my goals of my campaign. So this is not a new position for my constituents. But, there have been concerns expressed about the addition of the taxes on people. We addressed that when we passed the second bill. We exempted certain areas of the certain sectors of the economy, the farmers, the loggers, the manufacturers, from that increased consumption tax because we heard from them. They said, hey, we can't pass this off like everybody else can. This will hurt us more than it will help us, and it'll hurt us drastically. So we heard that, and we passed the second bill that remove them from that. But of course, those bills can be tossed between the chambers. We can tweak it. I know there have been people who say, we need to eliminate the income tax without replacing it. I'm all for that. If we can find growth, if we can find enough growth by eliminating the income tax that we don't have to replace it with a without a revenue stream, I'm for that. The problem is getting it passed, because I don't think many people up here trust that eliminating the income tax without replacing it with a source of revenue would not be, horrible for our state budget. And, there's enough people who have those concerns that the best way to get this passed would be to replace it with a source of revenue. And that's, I think, the idea behind why we had to add that consumption tax.
Representative McCarty, any word from you on this, or?
I think they did a great job pretty much summing all of it up. I think one piece of that, you mentioned several different things that we're working on to make Mississippi more competitive. And, mentioned just briefly when we were talking about education was the teacher licensure reciprocity for those coming in from out of state. Actually, Chad, not to play moderator, but Representative Owen had worked a lot on a universal recognition bill that would affect the same kind of thing we did with teacher licensure, but with a lot of different occupations. So I'm not even going to attempt to talk about that. But if he thinks that that's something he needs to mention right now, I would throw it back to him, because I think that's another thing that's really going to do a good job to bring people into the state and to make us more attractive for businesses and for people looking to work.
Yeah, absolutely. That's on the list. So go ahead if you want to. This conversation is all about things that you all are working on to make Mississippi more competitive.
I can't work this phone today. Yeah, so I started. I worked on with Representative Curry a big bill, an occupational licensing universal recognition bill. Last session we passed a bill that recognized if you're a military family moving into the state, we have Keesler, we have Columbus, then you don't have to go through the full occupational licensing program. You get granted your license if you are in good standing with your state for, I believe it was a year, under your whatever your license was. That was a way to help our military families moving in. So what we did is we expanded that to bring that competitiveness you talked about. We expanded that to everyone under this occupational licensing bill. Basically, if you are in good standing, regardless of if you're a barber, a cosmetologist, an architecture, whatever it is, whatever the state licenses you to do, except for lawyers and doctors, if you're in good standing in your state for a year, then you are granted your occupational license in an expedited fashion. You don't have to take the additional training requirements. You don't have to sit on a waiting list for a year before you can get your license. You're granted your license nearly immediately. And when we talk about Mississippi, one of the problems we have is the brain drain. We can't recruit new people to come and move into our state. So this is one of those ways to knock down those barriers at the state lines, to attract those people to our state, to say, hey, we're going to make it as easy as possible on you to get a job, to get your license, and to be a good Mississippi citizen and productive for our little society here. So that's a really good bill. I know it passed the House. It passed the Senate. I don't know if it's in conference or not. I have to check on that. It may be already with the governor.
Thank you. Senator Johnson, we'll give you the opportunity to speak to some of these issues. Specifically, though, if you could talk about, remember we mentioned the performance-based economic development incentives, and then, of course, the tax issue. So if you want to comment on those two, it'd be great.
Sure. So MFLEX has a few different avenues that companies can take. Really, it's just a way of streamlining incentive programs that helps both MDA and companies find a route that works for them. The idea behind that is just to simplify, and then it also has some more accountability measures. So the idea is that we can not only make it more appealing for companies to come to Mississippi, but also we can stay on top of if they are performing the way that they've agreed to perform better than we currently are. One of the problems that we've had with any kind of incentive program is that it's piecemeal together over time. And one of the best things we can do is to streamline that, make it very simple to understand, put everything in one place. And I think just the simplification of that is more attractive to most businesses. As far as the tax plan submitted by the House, I agree with Jansen in that they threw out a starting place. I don't believe the Senate is prepared to take that legislation up this year, and I could see us doing more work over the summer to get a better understanding of what effects that may have. Obviously, that's a very complex change to our economy. We don't know. Taxes can be used as incentives, as we've discussed. We have many tax credits that would incentivize people to invest in different aspects of our economy or to hire certain people. And so taxes nudge behavior. We don't know the full effect of what increasing a sales tax may do to alter people's behavior. We don't know the full effects of how to implement current tax credits. So we have certain commitments on tax credits, including annual tax credits for people that you hire, or for the inventory tax, which you pay to the county or city and and then get a credit back for that on your income tax. Those weren't addressed in that bill. Those are things we have to figure out how to handle going forward. And I think you could see in the future phasing out the 4% income tax without any tax increases anywhere else. But I think that as far as the tax increases, just the mere fact that a starting bill had one position and then some people were dropped off, I think that leaves a lot of questions on what the bill does, what effects it may have. We don't know what effects it'll have on state budget. We don't know what effects it'll have on people. Retirees may benefit from the grocery tax, but in Mississippi, retirement taxes, there is no tax on retirement income already. And so sales tax would increase. So retirees who've already paid taxes on a bulk of their income will have a tax increase on this, as well as people in a lower income bracket that don't pay income taxes will suddenly have a tax increase. So there are several things that we need to consider with that. In my personal opinion, I don't believe income tax is that big of a driving factor in attracting people to Mississippi. I think that we need to do more. If we want to stop brain drain, we need to have places that are attractive to students graduating. We need to have employers that feel comfortable coming to Mississippi and hiring and retaining skilled workers for the jobs that they want. And I don't think that eliminating the income tax will help us compete with Florida, Texas, or Tennessee, which are the closest states that I'm aware of around us that don't have an income tax. As a business owner, you can oftentimes reduce your income taxes by growing your business. So anytime I buy more businesses or expand my business, I can reduce my taxable income. I can't reduce my sales tax income, use tax income, or property tax income. Expenses. So from my perspective, an income tax is not a bad thing, especially for business owners, and that's who we need to attract to the state. And this also separates individual income and corporate tax. So there'll still be a corporate income tax, which also concerns me quite a bit. So I think that you'll see the Senate not take this bill up. I think that we'll look at it more over the summer, see if there's anything we'd like to do or not, and may or may not see something next session.
Thank you. Anybody else have any, before we leave this topic, any final thoughts or any other conversation about the tax issue or the MFLEX issue? Senator Jansen mentioned MFLEX and mentioned the streamlining the state economic development incentives, and I think we all applaud that. That's certainly a needed thing. I know Representative Tubb, you're on workforce development. I don't know if you've studied the MFLEX and have worked through that process with your committee.
Sorry, and no, we didn't discuss a lot of it in committee meetings, and so I don't know where that's going to go. But Donnie Bell is the head of the chairman of that committee, and I will ask him about it today. I wasn't exactly as up on the MFLEX as I should be, but look forward to talking to him, and hopefully if it's good for the state of Mississippi and the people of District 87, I look forward to helping get that through.
I think your colleagues would all agree, this being your first session, there's probably a lot of things moving at a faster pace than
yes, it is.
But one comment from the moderator's seat before we move on, the legislation that Representative Owen talked about, Southern Miss has been part of a group. We got a Defense Department grant to do the Mississippi Defense Initiative. And we've really worked through a lot of those things to help military families come to Mississippi to retire here or to be transferred here. And we see a disproportionate amount of our military families stay and retire in Mississippi. So I think that the fact that we're having these tax conversations, no matter where they fall in the future, sort of shows these retirees that, Mississippi is looking at these issues and moving forward. And I know that we often have trailing spouses in the military families, and some of them are CPAs or nurses, or so really applaud the legislature for sort of taking this issue and really looking at it in a broad effort. And again, this is one of these things that these conversations got started because we applied for a federal grant from the Department of Defense to study that at Southern Miss. And so for those of you who wonder how these federal grants work, and sometimes they come full circle, this is a great example of that. Representative Owen, I see you. Go ahead. No.
I got remuted. Yeah. So just an update on that universal licensing bill. I just looked it up and it's actually on the governor's desk. So it's not in conference. It's waiting to be signed by the governor.
Yeah. That's a great example of everybody pulling together. And speaking of the economy and everything moving forward, we've officially got a new director at MDA. And so John Rounsaville has been confirmed. I guess, Senator Johnson, y'all have, I know it's been through committee. I think it's been voted on the floor. I didn't look it up.
Yes, we did.
Okay. So I don't know if any of you have had an opportunity to work with John. We've known John for a long time. He's former USDA rural director for the state, federal post he's held under a couple of different administrations. So looking forward to John Rounsaville's leadership at MDA. Any comments on sort of the new leadership over there, and that coupled with these hopefully streamlined incentives may be a great help to all our communities.
Well, I'll jump in real quick about John. I think MDA is doing a great job right now. They helped us a lot with that. And you guys did too with the mill coming into Lumberton. They helped Forever County out with a new pool manufacturer company that's coming into Picayune. But one thing that sticks out about him, I have some friends who work for him at MDA, and he's a military guy. If they're not sitting their desk at 0800, he's going to know about it. If it's 0803, he's going to know about it. And I really like that about somebody. He runs a tight ship there, and he seems to be doing a good job. So,
any other comments? All right. Well, let's move on here. We've got a full menu of things to talk about this morning. Let's jump over to some other economic development issues. Obviously, we just talked about MDA, but I know something that's happening in our area because many of us are seeing the trucks and the infrastructure going in, and that's rural broadband. So I want to introduce the topic of rural broadband, especially as it relates to the pandemic, because what many of us found out was, our universities have tremendous bandwidth and we can keep our systems up and running, but when our students were forced to work remotely, and this also is a public school issue or any K through 12 issue, our students did not have connectivity at home. And so there's been a lot of work gone into this. And I know it was about 1.2 billion in federal CARES money last March. The legislature, you all decided to use some of that funds to partner with rural electric cooperatives, strategically invest in rollout. I know that's a big leap. We ranked 42nd out of 50 in connectivity in 2020. And the FCC says at least 35% of rural Mississippi lacks broadband. So when we talk about economic development, obviously this is an important issue. So I'd be interested from you all's perspective, kind of how you see broadband and the building out of the infrastructure. So
I think that's one of the most important things we can do in Mississippi. It opens up opportunities throughout the state. And I think given the rural areas we have in the state, it will help with education. It will help with businesses being able to locate. I think we even, and Kent, you may have the number on this, but I believe several schools in Mississippi still don't have what qualifies as broadband internet. So there's no doubt that that's top priority. In my opinion, that's one of the best investments the state can make in partnering with internet service providers or companies that would lay fiber optics.
I definitely agree with Senator Johnson. I look forward to, I've talked to Mississippi Power. I've talked to the people at Comcast, AT&T extensively about this. That is one of the, going door to door last year. That was the biggest thing that I had addressed to me was their broadband capability. So I look forward to that. I wanted to say something about Mr. Rounsfield. I look forward to getting to know him and helping bring some industry to not only the Pine Belt, but to the state of Mississippi. And some of the dollars that I think we should invest in is entertainment. One of the biggest things I hear about Mississippi is people would love to move here, but there's not enough things to do. And so I'd like to see maybe let's do some type of study on that to help address that issue.
Kent, can you speak to the sort of the broadband issue as it relates to the K through 12? I know that our public schools were really challenged when the pandemic hit, and it was, everybody sort of moving around in not synced up fashion to begin with.
Yeah, that definitely was one of the more challenging aspects of last year, which was full of really challenging things. But last year we addressed some of this through the legislation that, or through the CARES Act money that came down from the federal government, just to get the ball rolling on some rural broadband initiatives. And I know the year before that, the session before I was here, we passed some really major rural broadband initiatives as well. So from what I've heard, this next pot of money that's coming from the federal government for, coronavirus relief is a little more flexible. It can be used over a long period of time. And one of the things it can be used for is broadband. So broadband infrastructure. So I would imagine that last year, I think we put about 150 million, maybe 100 million, somewhere in that, I think it was closer to 100 of the CARES Act money into that. I think we'll see even more of that go into it this year to kind of more fully build out our broadband infrastructure, so that if, this does happen again, or even if, one of the things that we've learned from this is that while classroom education is best, if there is a reason or something arises that does not allow us to meet in person for our schools meet in person, they do have options. So if we get that in place now, in the future, if there's a situation that arises where we can't all be in school, if someone has mentioned, there are schools that have had to close in the past due to like really bad flu outbreaks. The flu, we have the flu every year. So I didn't know that was even a thing that happened. I've never heard of a flu day before, but there are schools that have had to do that. If the flu they have so many cases, they have to close. Well, now if you're going to be out for a few days, you could go virtual rather than lose all those days of instruction, and then have to add days onto the end of your school year, or lose Easter break, or, anything like that. We can skip that and instead just meet virtually. So we have definitely made progress in that regard. I think we'll continue to make progress with this new money coming down. I know, most of my district is Oak Grove, and it doesn't necessarily qualify as rural, but I do represent some rural as well. And I've talked with several constituents, over the last year about their frustration, in that they just don't have access to anything. I talked to a guy, and I think I talked about him the last time I was on here with you guys, but he called me and just said, we're out here in Summerall. Our neighbors have broadband. They just didn't run the cable to the next house, or, across the field or whatever. And we've tried satellite internet, we've tried a hotspot, and just, there's nothing. They have no options. And, their kids are in school with the other kids across the street that have broadband. So that was obviously, they were not on a level playing field. And, that is not even to speak of the districts, in other parts of the state where no one has access to fast, reliable internet. So hopefully we can address that, take advantage of this one-time money from the federal government to build out our infrastructure. We've passed some different broadband legislation this year to allow the cooperatives to, use access some of the cable maybe that's already buried. And I don't know where that legislation's at right now, but that's something that I think will make a difference. And again, just this is it's been a historic year in so many ways, but the amount of money that Mississippi has at its disposal, one-time money from the federal government to really make a difference in some of these, critical infrastructure needs that we have, I think it's a great opportunity, and I hope to see us, move in that direction over the next year.
It's certainly unprecedented times with the amount of federal money that's moving around in our economy. Anybody else want to speak to the broadband issue? I am curious about your thoughts, and obviously the free market is the free market, and I certainly am a I think the free market has made our country what we are today. But in some areas, and especially around the Pine Belt, I see, and in other more densely populated areas, you see competition coming in rural broadband and fiber being laid, which is replacing some of the, or will compete against some of the existing, I guess, copper infrastructure that's out there. So just curious about what your thoughts are, if anybody has any thoughts, sort of as we get more competition in the more densely populated areas, and how there could be some incentives basically to sort of push those private companies out into the more rural areas. Or do you think the rural cooperatives is really the answer? Like they answered the call to the electric utilities years ago. You know, will that be the best avenue forward toward rural broadband? Anybody comment on that?
I think Chad, from my understanding, the power company's got the infrastructure there, and it should be a quick thing. They're saying they can use their existing lines to funnel that and shorten the curve of the going underground. It's my understanding, and it's real close from talking to both sides. I think, from my understanding, it's going to conference. Senator Johnson can attest to that, but I think it's going to conference this week or weekend, and they're really close to getting this done.
Good. Any other comments on rural broadband?
I think I guess to kind of close it up. I know last year when we or the year before, whenever that was, when we passed the I think a lot of them, looked at it, and it is expensive to run, cable and things like. And I'm certainly not an expert on broadband or anything that has to do with technology or really anything, but I know that it's expensive to do that. And when they looked at the numbers, for a lot of them, it still was not an attractive investment. And that would have, obviously the nature of a cooperative, that work would have just increased the rate for ratepayers in the cooperative. In some cases, so much that it would have made them non-competitive, or it would have made it a burden on everyone involved. So I think what we've seen now we've been able to provide some incentives with this federal money coming down, it's a lot more attractive. And I think the free market works whenever it's allowed to truly be free. And I think for better or worse, internet access is more of a utility than a commodity at this point. I mean, I don't know how anybody would have made it through the last year without an internet connection. And I know a lot of people were forced to do that. So whatever we can do, we've got to do everything we can, especially again, now that we've got this money coming down that can be used for this. We've got to do everything we can to level the playing field for everybody, because there's just no way that someone with access to a reliable internet connection and someone without it is going to be able to compete with each other, if they're on an educational level or on a work level. I mean, there are so many people, we talk about education a lot, how our students have been virtual for large parts of the year, but a lot of, regular working people have been working from home as well. So this is a huge issue, obviously, that we've known it's a huge issue. It's always been, where's the money going to come from? Well, now the money is here. So obviously, no matter, this is a multi-billion-dollar project for the state of Mississippi to get broadband fully built out, but we've got a down payment on it now that has been returned to us because of coronavirus. So I'm all for, I think we all seem to agree that this is a great use for this. And now that we're allowed to do it, and again, I think the time horizon on this new pot of money from the federal government is until the end of 2024. So that gives us years to do this. And that was the problem with the money last year, was that it had to be used by the end of the calendar year that ended last year. So that is 6 months. It was about all we had to work with that. And that is obviously not enough time to build out a broadband infrastructure. But now that we have several years, I think we've got a real opportunity to put a dent in this. And once we get the ball rolling, at that point, I think you'll see a lot more participation and buy-in from private enterprises and electric cooperatives and different things like that. So I think it's a really exciting time. Hopefully, and when we're doing this again in 5 years, we can say, remember that time we didn't have broadband? Well, now we do. But we'll see how it all shakes out, I guess.
Anybody else have a comment? While we mentioned the unprecedented amounts of federal spending and the unprecedented amounts of money coming to the state of Mississippi, I don't know if y'all have seen the final numbers about what will be at your disposal yet. Does anybody have the the number of the amount that may come directly to the state. I know there will be money, as I understand it, because we're in round 3 for the universities. There is money that comes directly to the universities, community colleges. I'm not sure how the K-12 money gets spent, but I think there's a large amount, maybe $1.5 billion, 1.5 to 1.
I think the state's getting 1.8 billion.
1.8 billion. So any discussions, I guess y'all will have, later in the year if you need to come back or what. So I just sort of throw that out there, and then we'll transition to healthcare. Maybe it's too early to know a plan. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of infrastructure, a lot of programmatic money. So 1.8 billion. So don't
I have
envy.
no doubts we'll be able to spend it all. It's just if we'll be able to spend it wisely.
Well, and if you're in the same bucket that the universities and some of us are in, you get so many rules and regulations that sometimes spending it it's a challenge. And then of course we're all going to have to stand for audit at the end, probably on the state level and certainly on the federal level from the Inspector General. So we'll
one of the things that is unique about it is under the federal bill, our local counties and cities are going to be getting their own portion directly. Right. So last year with the CARES Act money we received, the state had to decide how much to allocate to those cities and counties to help them offset their costs. We're not going to really have, I'm sure the cities and the counties are going to still ask for money, but they're not going to be as much as a priority as they were last year. So because they're all getting, I know Puerto Rico County is getting $10.8 million alone. The city of Peking's getting almost $2 million. Poplarville's getting I want to say 700,000 or 800,000. It's based on population. So with that being said, with us not necessarily having to worry about, sending it down to our localities and our counties to assist with their costs, it's going to be unique to see and interesting to see what the state can do with that money over the next few years. And I've read the bill that they passed, and the restrictions that was in there for the CARES Act are not in this bill. It looks to be very broad. Of course, the Treasury Department's got to promulgate their guidance that we're waiting on, but it looks like it's going to be a relatively broad bill. I know Governor DeSantis in Florida, he's already asked his legislature to appropriate $1,000 bonus to all the first responders in the state. I think that's only going to cost 3% of Florida's overall federal money that they're receiving under the plan. So we could get really creative to, help these people who have really been on the front lines of the pandemic, and really we could probably get even creative trying to figure out how to boost Mississippi's economy in the post-COVID world. So I'm excited to see what we can do with. Of course, there are strings attached. I think there's a one particular statutory string is that states and local governments can't cut taxes under this. If they receive the money, they can't cut taxes and then use the money to fill budget holes. But the language is really unclear. It basically is just an outright prohibition against cutting taxes, which is not the most conservative principle.
All right, any final word on that, or I'm going to transition to healthcare in our remaining 20 minutes or so. All right, many of you have mentioned, or a couple of you mentioned early on, some of the things you're working on. I heard Medicaid, the Medicaid technical amendments bill, I know has been in the news because there was some disagreement or a procedural, whatever it may be, it died and then was revived. And so I've never worked in the healthcare legislative arena, but it's always interesting when I see healthcare legislation get revived. So no pun intended. But specifically, let's talk about the Medicaid expansion. And so looking here, Medicaid expansion, Mississippi remains one of 12 states that has not accepted federal funds to expand Medicaid, as we all know, the health insurance program for the poor. With an uninsured rate of 13%, that puts a lot of pressure on the Mississippi healthcare system and conversation to expand Medicaid. especially when it comes to rural hospitals and rural healthcare. When former Vice President and Governor Mike Pence was governor of Indiana, Indiana did some expansion, and some have sort of held that out for a more conservative model. So just curious, want to give y'all an opportunity to talk about the Medicaid program, funding it this year in its current form, possibilities of expansion, what conversations are going on as we get near the end of the session about Medicaid. So who wants to be the lucky one to start us off here? Thank you, Senator Johnson.
I think so 2 parts. One is what we're looking at doing this year, and the other part, Medicaid expansion. So I think the driving points for this year's Medicaid tech bill is to try to make it more data driven and tie to MCOs, managed care organizations, tie outcomes to what the payment structure is. And then there's several small things, for instance, holdbacks on certain industries like community mental health or dentists, eliminating those holdbacks, making it on par with everything else. Also, a consistency with accreditation, consistency with payments from MCOs to providers, promptness of payments from MCOs to providers. Then also finding ways that we can invest more proactively. So currently in Medicaid, we don't fund any type of preventive health measures. Looking at what preventive health measures we can do. It's 2 parts. So we can look at it from a cost perspective on how do we spend less money on Medicaid patients, but then the whole point of it is to have better patient outcomes. And so you want to tie those 2 together. And so the goal for this year's Medicaid tech bill was to tie patient outcomes with more efficient use of dollars, and look at ways that we can do that based on what other states have done and the data we have. Of course, in Hattiesburg, we have Hattiesburg Clinic, who uses an Epic system, which has been fantastic for gathering. They've been a model for the nation and the world on the data that they use to make decisions on how to run the operations to get the best patient outcomes with the lowest cost that you can, without sacrificing patient outcomes. And so using data from like that and applying it to Medicaid will help us hopefully have better patient outcomes, spend less money. As far as Medicaid expansion, there's a lot of differing views on Medicaid expansion. We can look at it from the viewpoint that, yes, there's pressure on Mississippi hospitals because 13% of Mississippians fall in a gray area with no healthcare coverage. However, Mississippi's one of the few states that have such a high number of people that would qualify for Medicaid versus the number of productive people. When you see other states that are comparable to us that have taken on Medicaid expansion, some of them have tried to get out from under Medicaid expansion or repeal Medicaid expansion. They've been unsuccessful in doing so. States have tried different variances of Medicaid expansion. I think until we have a clear understanding of what the cost of Mississippi is going to be, I think it would be a poor decision on our part just to jump in and say, oh, we're going to build the economy by getting this 90-10 match, but you can go broke with matching programs. It still costs money, and it's still an expense. If we continue to see a trend of a retraction, which we hope we don't, right? We hope we grow, but if we continue to retract like we are, it will continue to put us in a bind financially, and one that's unpredictable. And so we need to get a better handle on that and focus more on growing our economy. Hopefully, it would be much smarter for us to grow our economy and get that 13% above where they are now, so that they can either afford or have a job that provides health insurance for them, instead of us just picking up the tab and continuing on.
Could you, I know there's others that want to speak to this. Could you speak to just a little bit the matching program? I don't know that all of our listeners understand exactly how that match works. I mean, you've made the statement that you can go broke with matching programs, and that's sort of so could you give a sort of since you're our resident accountant on screen, could you give us just a little bit of thumbnail? So not only Medicaid, but other matching programs, because we all hear that, hey, it's free money coming from Washington, but much of the money and many university programs even require matches. Sometimes it's an outright cash match. Sometimes it's another match, but as it relates to cash matching state.
Yep. So there's so many different points to matching. So first off, if you believe that just bringing money in from, say, the federal government, which Mississippi is a large recipient, right? So 2/3 of our budget or more is filled by the federal government. But it also, if you believe that the government drives the economy by money that it puts in, well, then that's probably a great decision. But that's not necessarily the case. So in my opinion, growth, GDP, business production grows your economy, and what you need is sustainable. So we use federal government to fill needs for the government, but I'm not looking for matching money to come in to grow our economy. So ideologically, I'm opposed to that philosophy. As far as dollars, so federal dollars come with all kinds of stipulations, like we've discussed already. You can say, well, we're going to do every matching program, and you get 3-to-1, 2-to-1, 4-to-1, 5-to-1. And the case of Medicaid Expansion, it's 90-10 match from federal government. However, you're still having to put out dollars, and in a lot of cases, what they want you to do with those dollars is duplicative to what you're already doing, or is not something that gets you a desired outcome for your state. So really, your dollars are better used getting the outcomes that you want for your state versus just trying to match to bring in federal funds. So I don't always agree with getting matching funds just because they're there. Yes, currently we have, I think it's a 2773 match with Medicaid. It would be 90-10 on the expanded amount, but that's also subject to change. It has changed already. If the federal government decides in 2 years to drop that to the current match rate, then we over double, almost triple the cost of what we're paying, which is an unpredictable cost and one that we can't afford to take on, not knowing what it could be in the future.
Thank you. I think the math is often important just for people to understand, regardless of where you are on issues. Sometimes this math becomes extremely complicated. Representative Owen, I know you want to chime in.
Yeah, I agree with everything, everything Senator Johnson said. And like you said about the unpredictability of, how that match is going to be in the future. Once you've created a government program or expanded it to a certain point, it's hard to bring it back. Excuse me, there's construction going on outside. It's hard to bring it back. If we get to the point in the future where we've expanded this program, we have these Mississippians on it, and then in, 2029, the federal government decides to increase that match drastically, how are we going to bring that? How are we going to rein that in? The only option we would have is to commit more state dollars to the program, because nobody's going to want to reduce a program that people are benefiting from. So it's really unpredictable on that end. But it could be more unpredictable even in the immediate future, because the Supreme Court right now is taking up I think 2 challenges to the Affordable Care Act, and these are the first 2 challenges to the act under the new makeup of the court. We moved from a swing court, 4-4-1 to a 6-3 conservative court. And there's a good chance that the court could, find a lot of provisions of the ACA unconstitutional and strike them down, which would throw, the program into a lot of disarray and could end up committing our state to a huge financial burden that we're not necessarily prepared to pay. So at least until those cases are resolved and those challenges are set aside, I think it would be irresponsible for us to commit to expanding the program with that out there.
Any comments on this topic? Representative McCarty, Representative Tubb?
I agree with Mr. Johnson and Mr. Owen, I think a lot of people don't know that, and I know I learned this, that just a few short years ago, the Medicaid program was 8 to 9% of our annual budget, and it's increased to over 30% now, and that's a lot of dollars. I agree with Chris. To spend money, you can't go broke at trying to get federal dollars.
Yeah, if Representative Watson was here, he would tell us what it was, and I forget the numbers, in 1980 when he came to the legislature.
20 million, he said.
$20 million in 1980, and it's just that's
And he said that was a big concern for them, how that it was
yes
going up.
Obviously, it was a different proportion of the budget too, dollar amount. So, okay, I want to give you all we got about 5 or 6 minutes left, so I want to give you all like one or so minutes to close. If you got any final thoughts or anything that didn't come up today that you want to talk about for a couple of minutes, and I'll start with you, Representative Tubb, and we'll go around the horn. But thank you all for being with us this morning, and I think this has been a great conversation and a lot of good stuff. So, Representative Tubb, I'll let you take a final minute or so if there's anything you want to say.
Well, thank you again for having us on. It's always good to hear different perspectives and talk about what's going on in Jackson. Like I say, I am the freshman of the legislature up there, so I've been listening and learning a lot. Hopefully next year I'll be able to be a bigger part of what goes on in Jackson, and I look forward to that. And that's there. We covered a lot today. There was a few things that we didn't get to in workforce development. One of the other things I do want to mention is a lot of talking to people in our district. They want to see more dollars invested in the career tech and bringing back shop. And I know a lot of talking to businesses, the lack of skilled people, there are welders, truck drivers, construction workers. There's a huge need for that. And I think it would help our state to invest more dollars in that and in the future. So again, thank you for letting me be on this morning. It's been a great experience.
Thank you. Representative Owen, we'll give you an opportunity to have a final word.
Yeah, I don't really have much left to say about this session. Somebody asked me the other day how the last 2 weeks of session are. I said, well, last year was crazy, but I remember it being a lot like the Hunger Games. That's what's in my head. I don't know. These last 2 weeks, conference week, I just keep thinking of the Hunger Games. So, but it should be interesting to see what comes out and what survives. I really want to thank you guys at ADP for what y'all do. Y'all have a great reputation across the state. Y'all do a lot of good work. I know Todd jumped in. He's a good Baptist. He jumped in and prayed and left, but he does a great job. Does a great job for Hattiesburg, and we give him a little credit. He got all that good stuff from Poplarville. So just again, thank you guys, and appreciate everything y'all do and for having us on.
Yeah. Representative McCarty.
Yeah, thanks again for letting me join y'all today. I think it was the last minute addition, but I'm happy to talk with y'all anytime. I mentioned a couple of the education things we've got going on this year that we're still trying to close out the year on. I just wanted to touch on a couple other things that we've done that I didn't mention earlier. One of them was the computer science curriculum bill that was authored by Kevin Felser, my colleague on the coast. It puts computer science education in every K-12 school. And on the elementary, middle, and high school level, there's different requirements for the curriculum in each level and the amount of hours in each level that a student can be exposed to. But I think this is a huge opportunity for Mississippi to, kind of update what we're teaching our young people and give them an opportunity to learn, be on the cutting edge of tech jobs as they move through their K-12 education. That too, at a fairly minimal cost to the state. One of the features, I guess, of the bill is that C Spire is committed to providing $1 million in funding. It's about $2 million to implement the whole program. And C Spire has agreed to cover the first $1 million of that. So I think that's huge legislation that we, tried to get passed last year and then kind of got caught up in the COVID mess. But, it did pass this year. We that is actually at the governor's desk. I'm not sure if he signed it yet or not, but I'm very confident that he will. We mentioned the loan forgiveness and the teacher raise that we passed earlier, and the reciprocity for licensure. And then the last thing was with our early learning collaboratives. Our area has been very fortunate to have be one of the first communities in the state to receive a collaborative or partner with a collaborative. We've got 3 in our area, and we did. So I authored a bill this year to kind of clamp down some of the language at the request of some review boards in the state to make them more, just some technical amendments, and then also increase the funding per pupil to $2,500 on the state side, and then that leaves the other $2,500 match from the private sector. So that was a request from the collaborative, basically saying, we're not able to do everything we need to do with the money we're getting, and it was a very small increase. I think it was about between $200 and $300 per pupil that we increased it. That language got removed from my bill on the Senate side, but we passed it anyway so they could get their technical amendments. But we do have a Senate version of that bill that's in conference. So hopefully, that's a Senator Wiggins from the coast. It's his legislation on the Senate side. We're hoping that we can meet this week. And I've had some conversations with the Senate, and I think that we all see the need for the increased funding. So hopefully that, that amended language comes out of conference that will increase the amount of funding just per pupil. It doesn't expand the size of the collaborative program, which I think we would love to see that. Maybe with some of the lottery money that we have, just a refresher on that, everything over $80 million that the lottery brings in goes to education. That can only be spent in a specific area of education, and pre-K is one of the areas that fall under that umbrella. So hopefully some of the money from that we'll be able to use to actually expand the collaborative program and serve more students. Our collaborative program, for those that don't know, has been recognized nationally as one of the best in the country. We've shown what a public-private partnership can look like and how it can be beneficial for everyone, and at a relatively low cost to the state. Our entire pre-K program only costs us about $8 million, which is a lot of money. But when you look at the whole education budget and how much we spend in other areas, it's really a relatively small amount to have a huge impact on our young people and on our state moving forward. I think every time I come on this meeting with y'all, I talk about how important early learning is, but I just can't stress it enough that getting to our young people early and educating them while they're teachable is one of the most important things we can do in improving their outcomes and then improving the outcomes of the state as a whole over generations. So hopefully we can see some more money go into that. That's one of the big things I've worked on this year. And again, with this last piece of legislation that we're working out the details with the Senate, hope to see that funding piece stay in for the final vote. I know that was a lot of information, but I just wanted to kind of wrap up the pre-K conversation since we didn't get a chance to talk earlier.
Good stuff. Senator Johnson, we'll give you the final word.
Yep. Okay. I saw one of the chats or questions pop up about historic tax credits, and I've talked with several people in Hattiesburg about those, and it is important to Hattiesburg. The House presented a fantastic bill for historic tax credits. For those of you that are interested, it's going to conference. We should be coming out of conference. I don't know exactly what it'll look like, but the intent is to find to improve the legislation so that banks can have confidence in lending for those projects on historic buildings, and have confidence that the state tax credit will be available to the person who's applied. It will also have some other things, possibly increasing the cap or changing how the cap works, and having a rollover so it doesn't expire if it's full, if it's capped out in the year that you finish. Outside of that, thank you all very much for having us on today. And I know I say this often when I'm on here, Hattiesburg is in a great position to grow in our state. We have so many valuable resources in our community that make it attractive, in my opinion. And I think that, in my opinion, the most important things we can do are not only attract new businesses to our area, but encourage people either graduating from USM or locally to build and grow businesses organically at home instead of leaving the state to do that. And so again, thank y'all very much. Always enjoy catching up. I wish we were live and in person so we could see everybody.
Boom. thank you to the panelists, and I really appreciate all your input. You've got a busy week, so for all of our listeners, before I hand it to Chad Newell, watch the internet feeds and the news feeds this week, because there will be a lot of action at the state capitol as they wind up this legislative session this week and next week. Thanks, guys, and I'm gonna give it back to you, Chad Newell.
Okay, thanks, Chad Driskell. Thank you for moderating today. One last thanks to our legislators today. You guys did a marvelous job. Obviously, you have a lot of complicated issues to grapple with and determine a path forward. And as you head toward the end, we wish you the best in the conference week and navigating through those waters. And you've already passed some significant legislation this year, and I know that you'll continue to do so as you wrap up the session. So thanks again to Senator Jansen and Representatives McCarty, Tubb, and Owen. You guys did a great job with us this morning. One more shout out to our sponsors, Cooperative Energy, Forest Health, Paint Companies, and South Group Insurance. You guys are such an important part of our business community. I do want to let our audience know that we have some more exciting programs coming up on April 9th. Today we covered the state side of the house, and on April 9th, we're going to have a State of the Region. So we are pleased to have Mayor Toby Barker and Supervisors David Hogan and Warren Bird join us for our Zoom April 9th, Friday at 11 a.m. I encourage you to sign up for this program. We've got so many awesome things going on in our region, and it will be good to hear from our local elected officials on their perspective about where we are and where we are going in the future. That program is sponsored by Citizens National Bank. Thanks to Kevin Brewer, the local market president, for stepping up and sponsoring the State of the Region program. Finally, I want to talk with you for just a minute about our Forward Together campaign. As I mentioned on the front end of the program today, Ab Payne, our campaign chair, has done a marvelous job, and all of our volunteers who have helped us raise over $3.8 million. To put this in perspective, the most money that the community has raised for economic development for the ADP prior to Forward Together was $3 million back in 2015 for our Pinnacle campaign. So for us to raise an additional $800,000 above and beyond what we had raised in the past, and do it in the worst times that we've had to grapple with, just speaks volumes about this corporate community. 2/3 of our funding at the ADP comes from the private sector, 1/3 from the public sector. So we couldn't do what we do at the ADP with our regional chamber and economic development agency without these awesome private sector dollars. And they are going to good use, guys. I hope that everyone has seen where we were just ranked number 2 in the United States in job growth and the percentage of job growth during the pandemic. 24/7 Wall Street, an economic research group out of New York, analyzed all 392 metro areas from February of 20 to November of 20. Only 28 of the 392 had any job growth, and we had 2.9% job growth in Greater Hattiesburg. The #1 community in America, in Wisconsin, was at 3.1%. So we were very close to being ranked #1 in the United States in percentage of job growth. So just as Senator Johnson was saying earlier about the need to create more and better jobs, we are doing that here in the Pine Belt. And the beauty about what we're able to do is we think very regionally, and we are not defined by political boundaries. So for example, one of the latest companies that we just recruited, Idaho Forest Group, to Lumberton in the southern tip of Lamar County, boy, that's going to benefit Pearl River County and surrounding counties. And it's just, I was thinking about Representative Owen saying he represents all of Pearl River County and the southern tip of Lamar County. Well, that's a great example of $120 million CapEx going in and 130 jobs being created, great salaries, 40 to 45,000 average wages plus benefits. The company also will buy $50 million in timber within a 70-mile radius annually, generating a lot of wealth for local timber owners. And so it's a great example of just the multiplier effect of the direct jobs and indirect and induced jobs, and very exciting. Another great example coming up on the northern tip here in Jones County at the Hattiesburg-Laurel Regional Airport. Forest and Jones counties have partnered on developing a wonderful distribution center site. It's about 130 acres you've seen as you drive along I-59 that's cleared and grubbed and partially graded. Well, we are now in a better position to recruit a distribution type center in that will create jobs in that area. So a good example, Jones County is not part of our service territory, and we are helping develop property in Jones County because we get it regionally. We know that the hub always benefits. And I just kudos to our local elected officials for giving us the autonomy and the flexibility to partner with those around us. So, so excited about what we have been able to do. Thank you again for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you guys. We'll be on Zoom on April 9th for the Accelerate, but we will be in person soon enough. Bring on the vaccines. I think we're doing a great job of the rollout of the vaccines, and everyone who wants a vaccine can get a vaccine. And I encourage us all to get vaccinated. Hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll see you around soon. Take care.